Ancient woodlands are pretty unique habitats, but they are currently facing many pressures that are threatening their health. In this video, we're going to look at two of these pressures. First, impacts of surrounding land use on the ancient woodland border, and second, climate change. We're going to cover what impacts these threats have on ancient woodlands, what happens when they occur at the same time, and what can be done about them. There are still 8,500 square kilometres of ancient woodland left in the UK, especially in Scotland and England. Ancient woodlands are normally small. Their average size in the UK is only 2 hectares. It's difficult to make them out individually on this map, so let's instead look at the total area of ancient woodland contained in these larger grid cells. We can see there's lots of ancient woodland in Scotland and South England, for example. Instead of being part of larger woodlands, ancient woodlands in the UK are often surrounded by land intensively used by people, such as roads or cropland, or more open habitats, such as heathland. This exposes their borders to a range of different pressures. For instance, they often receive pollution from neighbouring roads, industry, or croplands. Woodland borders next to more open habitats also tend to be drier and warmer than parts of the same woodland further away from the border. These pressures can harm the health of ancient woodlands. Evidence shows that these effects can impact woodland borders for hundreds of meters. That means that the smaller an ancient woodland is, the more likely it is that a large part of its area, and sometimes its entire area, is exposed to these pressures. Of course, that also depends on what the landscape around the ancient woodland looks like. This is a map of how pressures from the surrounding landscape affect ancient woodlands in the UK. Again, for better visibility, what you can see here is the total area of ancient woodlands exposed to these pressures in each grid cell. You can see that these pressures are particularly high in South East England, South East Wales, and in East Scotland. Ancient woodlands are also already grappling with the consequences of climate change, and this is going to increase in the coming decades. Changes in temperatures and precipitation will, in some places, change which tree species can thrive there. In addition, extreme events that can damage and kill trees, such as droughts, fires, storms, and floods, are also predicted to increase. This is a map of the average level of climate change risk for ancient woodlands in each grid cell. Ancient woodlands in Northern Ireland, South East England, and around the Welsh-English border will be exposed to the highest levels of climate change. When you compare these maps, you can see that in some areas, such as here in South East England and East Wales, ancient woodlands are both already under pressure from the surrounding landscape, and they will experience the most severe climate change compared to ancient woodlands elsewhere in the country. Why does that matter? Pressures from the surrounding landscape can make ancient woodlands more vulnerable to climate change impacts. For instance, an ancient woodland surrounded by highly flammable grassland will be at a higher risk of wildfire during dry weather than an ancient woodland entirely surrounded by comparatively less flammable land, such as other woodland. Another example is chronic exposure to heavy metal pollution damaging root growth, making trees more vulnerable to droughts. This means these ancient woodlands are under more stress than ancient woodlands that experience only one or none of these pressures. So what can be done to make sure ancient woodlands can thrive in the future, especially those ancient woodlands that are exposed to both of these threats? First, we need to reduce pressures from the surrounding landscape. This necessarily involves not only the owners and managers of ancient woodlands themselves, but also those of the surrounding land. Strategies include ensuring that sources of pollution are sited well away from ancient woodland borders, and that pollutant flow to ancient woodlands is minimized. Where appropriate, reforestation projects could share a border with ancient woodlands, acting as shelter belts against the impacts of the surrounding landscape. Second, we need to give ancient woodlands the best chance at weathering climate change. This will include reducing other sources of stress, such as overgrazing or overshading, and managing soils and water in a way that optimizes their availability for trees. It can also include implementing a wildfire response plan. Finally, whenever tree planting is carried out at an ancient woodland site, native species that are likely to thrive under the future climate should be given preference. If you want to learn more or find out about the threat levels to a particular ancient woodland, please get in touch. Thanks for listening.